Hello, was not. A practice that just helps to contra to undo a lot of the postural stickiness of sitting for long periods of time. So whether you have to drive a lot, or you're in your car for long periods of time, or you're doing a long drive, or you have a life that just requires that you have to be sitting in a chair for a large part of your day. Let's do some things that will unwind and undo some of that postural habit. But we'll start lying on your back. And just for the purposes of the recording, since I forgot to hit record. We're looking again at, here's just the picture I showed of your psoas, lumbar spine, psoas muscle, outer hip, and the attachment here in the inner thigh. Okay, so we're just using that visual to kind of give us a sense of where we can locate sensation around that part of your body as you're lying on your back. Okay. And lower situation here. And see if you can here, just in these kind of initial few minutes, as you try to envision and then sense into and locate the psoas, take some of this time to discern where you feel specific pressure against your spine, against the back of the pelvis, the back of the hips. With your legs long, you might have already decided months and months and months ago that you're more comfortable with your feet standing on the floor, or that your back is more comfortable, your hips are more comfortable with your legs extended. Take a few breaths and just here and just sense into what you normally sense into. And if you have any kind of habitual unilateral tightness or a little more curvature on one side of your spine than the other, you might already be feeling that, sensing that. But start then again down at your feet, sensing the weight of your heels, and come in as close as noticing whether or not, without even looking, whether one foot turns out more than the other foot, one ankle, one knee, does one leg turn out more than the other leg? In that, can you sense more of the outside of one foot, ankle, or leg on the floor than the other? And then bring awareness upward through the hips, through the pelvis, right around the place where your thigh bones meet your hip joints. Right up into the cups of your hip joints. And how do things feel there? In any way, just by any sensation, anything that there is to feel there. If it's not specific tightness, you might just notice another kind of just a subtle energetic sensation. And again, you might sense more of something on one side than the other, very normal. And upward from your pelvis into a waist spine, where we saw the illustration of the psoas. Most of its major attachments are at the lumbar. And then the very bottom rib spine vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae. Take awareness continuing upward through the upper part of the ribcage spine, maybe through the ribcage itself, just as you're breathing and feeling tension against the ribcage as you breathe in, and the release of that tension as you breathe out. Upward into the space around your collarbones and your shoulders and your upper back and your shoulder blades. And you might, just as you're here, push your head, press your head into the floor or into a blanket if you're on something, so that you feel your chest lift and your shoulder blades lift. There's some space behind your back. And then just kind of settle back into the upper back, swishing the shoulder blades from side to side. And then just feel the weight of your arms, your upper back there. Take 4 or 5 more breaths. I'm going to see how it all feels. And then bring your feet up to stand on the floor. And so that you have enough space, your feet are wide on your blanket or on your mat, and they're just away from the backs of your hips so that you have lots of room, right, to take the knees from side to side. Just let the legs fall. Let the heads of the femurs move through the cups of your hip joints. Just feeling for any specific pull, tightness. You might be feeling tightness along the sides of your waist. If you're arching into your low back, right, feel the pull or the extension in the front of your hips. One more time to each side. Okay, and let's come up from there. And if you have 2 blocks, you want 2 blocks for this. I'll show that setup. And I think we've done this once or twice. Where you have 1 block on its smallest, shortest end standing up, right? So it's tall, and then you have another block on the long, skinny edge of the block, right underneath that one. And there's maybe 1.5 or 2 inches of space between the 2 of them. Okay, you might be more comfortable just depending on what's going on in your back, your chest, the shortness or tightness of your chest muscles. You might need to lay this one down so that it's flat. And your upper back is going to rest here, and the back of your head is going to rest up here. Okay, and if you only have 1 block, you could play with just doing that upper back block. So it could be on its skinny edge, and your head is more just sort of hanging, and you're getting a longer, deeper stretch in the front of your throat, but your head is hanging back. And if you have something else that you could use to support your head, you could improvise. Okay, but we want this to be a bit of a back bend, a supported back bend. So we want the chest to lift. We want the upper back to be supported right up between the shoulder blades. And the head is a little bit more elevated than that. It's going to feel like some intensity in here in the beginning. Decide if that's comfortable. Decide if that is well within tolerable window of tolerance. And if you had a bolster, you could let your knees come over a bolster, or you could just stand your feet on the floor. You could extend your legs. But find your breath. Come back to a comfortable breathing rhythm. Your breathing is going to be a little bit shaped a little bit differently here, right? Typically when we are supporting a lift of the chest and the upper back, we want to maybe concentrate softer breath deep in the belly, deep in the abdomen, right? So that we're not straining the back muscles and the chest and the rib cage muscles to try to move breath high in the chest and through the rib cage. Let the breath just move your belly. Feel the weight of your arms. Feel how the forearms and the backs of your wrists and hands rest on the floor. The weight of your arms, the weight and the hang of the upper arms. And a gentle pull of the arms and shoulders to gradually, gently broaden your chest. And we'll take another 3 or 4 breaths. And so a couple of ways to come out. I like to come off the blocks with as little effort as possible. Right, which means we should be able to just fall over to one side without doing any lifting, without pushing, without engaging your back at all. Right, bring your feet up to stand. And just let your knees fall to one side and then let that just carry the rest of you off onto your side. So the blocks will just sort of pop out from under you. Take a breath. Okay, and then if you can, just reach back behind you, reach over you and set the blocks off to the side so they're out of your way. You can just roll back onto your back. And then bring your knees into your chest. And then with your hands over your knees, turn your knees, drive your knees in circles in one direction. Sense your sacrum. Sense the wide, bony middle of the back of your hips. And you might notice here too, right? So we're going to try to just track awareness of any little structural imbalances from side to side. So as you're taking your knees in circles here, can you discern that you feel heavier, you feel more weight when you go to one side than you do the other? Switch directions, go 4 or 5 times in the opposite direction. And you're just making notes. You're just making mental notes. Feel what there is to feel. Feel the pull of your body's weight more to one side than the other, if that is indeed the case. It may not be. So then you can drop your feet to the floor. And from there, hips to one side, go ahead and press yourself up to come away from the ground. And then from here, let's make support that will support the sacrum, okay? So that the sacrum will be lifted from the floor and the rest of you will be on the floor. So that can be bolster. That could be a single block. That could be a block with something softer over it if your blocks are hard. Or it could be a couple of blankets stacked up. It could just be one blanket, okay? Bringing that little bit of height, that little bit of support beneath your hips, right? If nothing else, even if you're not getting like a major hip extension stretch in the front of your hips, you're releasing a little bit of the pressure against the sacrum and allowing some of this musculature, this deep core musculature, so as to just soften a little bit. So you could do just that. You could have one long across your mat folded blanket under your sacrum. I'm going to grab the bolster and have the bolster And you just have your 2 feet on one side and the rest of you over on the other side, right? We've done this, what? Too many times to count. We know this one, right? You just get up on it, you let it support the back of your hips. This is a fairly big bolster. This bolster has a lot of density. It's fairly big. It's more round than it is flat. Flatter, lower bolsters are even sometimes preferable. This one really turns me a little bit upside down. So already I feel a lot of that pressure, that sort of carotid or cranial blood pressure, already coming up kind of through my neck and toward my head. And your body knows how to regulate that pressure. It's not like you're getting major over blood supply to your head. Your body knows how to regulate that pressure to keep that pressure stable. But you can feel it. You can certainly sense that and feel that. So your hips are up, whatever you are using to support your hips. And then you can just be here. You can just be here. Typically, though, remember from the picture how the psoas muscle, it attaches at the lumbar spine, the bottom of the thoracic spine, attaches all down through those vertebrae until it comes through the pelvis and then kind of through the sort of bottom holes or openings in the pelvis, and it's moving from back right to front. It's moving from your spine to the front of your pelvis and then down and then attaches into your inner thighs. Okay, so we're giving it a chance to extend and lengthen when we do a pose like this, hip extension. Give yourself another breath before you extend the leg. And then one leg, just take one leg and let one leg go. And then notice right away where you feel the majority of the sensation of stretch. Good, so we'll just rest with that, rest with that. So feel the effects of sitting. Feel the effects of the culture of sitting. The seated posture, the sitting in a chair or car seat posture is the opposite of this, right? This is extended. This is a hip muscle that is extending, right? And we're sitting and driving. Our hip muscle is in flexion. We're flexing that hip muscle. It's contracted, it's shortened, it's tightened. And typically in that scenario, our core musculature also stays in a sort of unused, short and tightened, soft, weak scenario. So let's take another 2 or 3 breaths. Just let this breathe. The hip of your extended leg. If you need to come up in between for any reason, you can come up and come off your back in between. Especially if you're feeling or succumbing to allergies at all. Some people who have allergies are suffering a little bit right now. If this is a lot of pressure for your head, of course you can come up. But switch legs. If you're here and you're okay and you want to switch legs, go ahead and switch legs. Maybe close your eyes and just go send your awareness right down into that attachment. Maybe where you can sense attachment at the inner thigh, below the hip joint. But at the same time, sense how that extended muscle track that back from the inner thigh through the pelvis and see what you can sense here along the abdomen, that deep abdomen and lower back. I'm aware that my psoas on the left side is tighter and shorter. So there's a lot more for me to feel on this side. Let's take 3-4 more breaths here. So go ahead and pull that foot back up and lift your knees. If you're on a bolster, maybe lift your knees into your chest. If you're on a block, just push your feet to the floor, come off the block and pull the block out from behind you. And if you're on a bolster, then you can just let your knees fall into your chest. And then with your hands, just push the bolster out from behind your back. And then I'm just going to roll it away from me so it's out of my way. Okay, and so from here, let's come over onto your side and slowly feel a shift in your carotid or cranial blood pressure, and then bring yourself up to sit. Okay, so let's go ahead and also just do a little bit of a stretch that will extend the related neighbor of your psoas is your it's a deep structural, attaches rib cage to hips, also quadratus lumborum muscle. So when you feel tight on one side of your back, when one side of your back tends to tighten up, might be typically where you feel it, kind of a big kind of wide ropey musculature in the waist part of your lower back. So we'll take the left leg extended and we'll let the right knee fall to the floor so the inside of your right foot is up against the inside of the left thigh. If you want to prop your hips up, if this helps you just to fold a little bit easier, you can prop up and sit up a little bit on a folded blanket. So when we reach out and fold over this extended leg, we're going to be turned slightly. Okay, so we're looking for, if our left leg is extended and we're folding toward that left leg, for the right side of your back to feel slightly more extension. If you're on a blanket, you can just slide the hands down toward the foot. You can give it a little bit of a twist, right? If you want to just feel a little more length, a little more intensity, you can reach the right hand across to the outside of the left foot and feel a slight twist, or just take the fold. Give it another 2 more breaths. Walk or slide your hands back up. Switch legs. Okay, so extending the right leg and reaching, extending, stretching away from the left knee toward the right foot with a slight rotation, slightly longer extension on the left side. Slight side bending to the right. With a little bit of extra rotation, reach left hand across to outside of right foot. Give yourself a little rotation along with that side bend. 1 or 2 more breaths. Yeah, then bring yourself back upright. Okay, and we'll take a recline twist. Save that. Let's do a recline twist. So your choice, right? Either with the bolster where you have your hands to either side and you're facing it and then you come down. Or you can be on your back with your knees to your chest and then your knees to one side. Okay. Either way, let's practice being somatically aware of any differential, right, in what you feel when you go one direction with your legs and your hips and your knees than when you go in the opposite direction. Okay, we're trying to gauge, right, the subtlety of any tiny little structural imbalance in the spine or the hips, because one side psoas might be a little tighter, shorter than the other. And it results in, right, it can result in a higher hip. It can result in your hips being a little rotated, depending on how it's pulling. So bring yourself into either a supported or unsupported reclined supine twist. So my arms are wide. I've dropped my knees to the right. You could have support behind your head if you just want your head to be a little elevated. And notice just how easy was it to get here? the weight of your knees, legs, hips, the weight of your lower body fall very naturally in this direction. Is it easy to breathe? Are you just as easily comfortable through the upper back? Are you balanced in the weight across your two shoulder blades, two sides of your upper back and your two arms? Or do you feel still slightly weighted toward the right so that the left shoulder blade and left shoulder and arm feel slightly lighter, slightly more elevated? Here, and just watch your breath here. Feel the fullness of a breath in and the complete, full and complete release of breath. One more breath on this side. Good. And then so move yourself back onto your back. And when you come and settle the sacrum onto the floor, the back of your hips to the floor, both feet are on the floor. A sense up into the two sides of the rib cage spine and your shoulders. Try to sense for balanced weight there, but just notice. Notice, because I took my hips to the right, my legs to the right, I still feel a little bit weighted that way. See what happens when we go the other way. I'll put my knees close to my chest and then let my knees fall off to the left. Again, noticing now what this feels like compared with, now you have a baseline for comparison from that first turn, from the first side. What do you feel here? It could just be something just as simple or as subtle as like your breath, the shape of your breath feels different. If you want to adjust the posture in any way, adjust the posture for more space, for more length, for more comfort, for more ease. Take another breath or two. Good, and then bring yourself from that rotation back onto your back, knees into your chest. Just come over onto one side slowly. Good, and then come from there, and let's do just a brief puppy dog pose. Just to bring some attention, some focus a little bit more upward in the upper register to your shoulders and your chest. So you're going to come to your knees. You come to your hands and knees, and we're going to leave the hips up over the knees, and just walk or slide your hands forward, arms long, until you rest your forehead on the floor, and let your tailbone and sit bones and pelvis, the whole pelvis tilts upward, like you're trying to point your tailbone toward the ceiling. And then adjust your elbows and your forearms so they rest comfortably, and the rest of your rib cage rests comfortably. Right, but like a sling or a hammock. The rib cage, the torso opening toward the floor, bending toward the floor. Ooh. Ooh. Give it another breath or two. Good, and then just shift your weight maybe a little bit forward, so you could release the intensity of the pose, and then come out. That was funny. I think Mr. Kitty Pots was trying to knock me over the whole time. But I could really feel that, like a much kind of deeper pull, a weirder little pull from the left side of the lower ribs, kind of along the side and the bottom of the rib cage. Where because this is shorter, because the psoas muscle is a little shorter and tighter, it pulls the rib cage down. So that stretch was really much more pronounced here. And you may have noticed something similar. So let's go ahead and set up a supported Supta Baddha Konasana bound angle pose with something to support and elevate your spine. I'm going to do blanket or sort of block underneath the bolster to angle or incline the bolster. And then you'll want a couple of things just to support the outer knees. If you have the soles of your feet together, your knees wide, have support for your outer knees. And I'm going to have another blanket for my head. So I will gather up that while you gather up what you need. Take a moment to set that up for yourself. Mr. Potts. I'm just going to use a couple of blocks. You could either, if you have a blanket over your mat, you could just throw the blanket aside so that your feet don't slide. have soles of your feet together so they don't slide, or if you have a sandbag over your feet, or if you have a strap, you can strap yourself in, but I'll meet you there momentarily. Lights. Lights, candles. Okay, and so this is a pose as well where we're looking for just a little softening of the groins and the abdomen. So you might just, as you're settling in here, reflect, pause to reflect how this pose, how this practice helps bring a healthy counterbalance, a healthy counter to the just innumerable hours we spend in the repetitive strain of a couple of postures. Chair sitting, car driving. Let's give ourselves here a few minutes. Soften what can soften. Or allow space for softening to happen. Nice. So just a few more minutes here. Stay close to your breath with your attention. Begin to move. If you feel like moving, maybe bring the legs and the hips, legs into extension, set aside your blocks. Come from your back, then just over onto your side. When you're ready, take your time. Again, you might just start with your legs and then just let the weight of your legs pull the rest of you onto your side. Pushing yourself up from the floor. From there, bring yourself to a comfortable seat. Take a moment just to pause here as you close your practice, and maybe you reflect on any sense of change or shift here, your nervous system, in your body, in your mood, in your state of mind from an hour ago. Close your practice here. Honor the capacity, the power of your practice to shift your nervous system, your physiology, to change your state of mind for the better when you need to. And thank you as always for your time. Namaste. We'll end here. Here if you have questions, comments, and see you next week. Thanks, guys. Peggy, Stephen, Melinda.